Hi, welcome to today's webinar on UST permit renewal and how to renew your permit in Keams. So what we're going to do first today is we're just going to briefly walk through some basic navigation items in Keams. We're not going to go too in-depth on that, but if you're looking for more detail, we do have a general overview of Keams video on our YouTube site as well as our website. And then we also have a video on the permitting process as well, if you want that as a reference. So a few housekeeping things before we get started. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. You are currently muted. We're keeping most people on mute just to kind of keep things running smoothly. But if you have a question, always feel free to use the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask to be unmuted. We will have a couple brief polls at the beginning and end of the webinar. If you can make sure and answer those, and the last one we will hang when we start Q&A. If you can just try and make sure and answer that before you exit the webinar, we really appreciate that. So a little bit about us. I am Allison Crowler from the Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, or SBEAP. My colleague Abby Kraus is also on with us as well today. So what SBEAP does is we offer free confidential environmental technical assistance to small businesses in Kansas. And for the purposes of our UST program, we're not as strict on small business. We do also assist medium and large businesses as well. So that is in the form of hotline assistance. So you can call our hotline to ask us questions about environmental compliance requirements and things like that. We offer site visits, and we also have resources on our website, such as the compliance calendar that we put out every year, the manual that we wrote on the updated regulations in 2020, and some other things on completing the walkthrough checklist, cleaning your spill buckets, inventory control, and other topics like that. So Abby is going to go ahead and put that poll up. And I am going to turn off my camera so you can see Keams in its full glory and go ahead and switch over to that. And Abby, can you just confirm for me that Keams is showing?
It is.
All right. So first off, a few navigation notes, as I was saying. So one really important thing is this site selection here. So by default, it's going to show you information for all of your sites at once. You can select one of your sites to just see information for that site. You will notice too the need help button down here. Oh, sorry. The need help button down here. So that's mentioned here. It's not actually present in this version of Keams. So if you need assistance, you're going to want to go to this contact up here. So if you click about or contact, that will take you to this Keams page on KDHE's website. If you're looking for help from there, I strongly recommend going to the remediation webpage. So that's the Bureau of Environmental Remediation's Keams page. It's got more information that's specific to BER programs, as well as specific contact information for BER and Keams. So going back here, this is notifications. So that's an at-a-glance version of notifications over here, and we'll get to that in more detail in a second, just to kind of show you what that looks like. And then looking at your profile and settings up here. So this is details on you as a user and your account. The main things to note here, so there's this certifier agreement form, and I actually point that out to say that for BER programs, that's not something you need to worry about. BER doesn't currently use this certifier agreement form for any of their programs. Another thing to note on this page is the notification delivery preference. So by default, that's going to be set to deliver in system and via email. So whenever you get a notification or something in Keams, that's also going to go to the email address that you have associated with your account. You can change that so it only delivers it in Keams. I strongly recommend keeping it on deliver in system and via email, especially if you don't check Keams that often, just to make sure that you're getting those notifications. And then There's also some information on sites associated with your account, so sites that you have access to. One thing to note here as well is this hide or show. Basically, if you ever have a site that's not showing up in your dropdown over here, you'll want to check over here and see if it's hidden and then go ahead and show that. This is also where if you have an account verification code from KDHE, you can use that. So that's going to be if you're trying to add a site that's already in the system and they send you a code to add that. So going back to home, and then the first stop is going to be dashboard. So the first section here is priority. That's going to be things like drafts that are still in progress to remind you to go ahead and finish those and submit. There's upcoming. So that is going to pull from scheduled items such as renewals. And then as needed, so that's going to be things like one-time use forms, like a repair inspection form maybe, or recurring things, so things that are due on a regular basis, such as maybe a permit renewal. And then draft is going to be things that are still in draft, so started but not yet submitted. To be signed, again, not really relevant here because BER doesn't use that signature process in KEAMS that some other bureaus do. And then we have in process. So a couple things to note while we're here. Once you start a form, let's say that you accidentally start your permit renewal twice, so you have 2 copies of that form in progress. You can delete the extra copy. KDHE can't delete it for you. And once you submit it, KDHE can't delete, it can't be deleted at all. But KDHE can change the status to withdrawn. Also, if you need to get in contact with KDHE about anything regarding one of your submissions, the best way to identify which submission you're talking about to KDHE is going to be to use the submission ID. So this number here for that form. And then going to notifications. So this is going to be the main way that KDHE is going to communicate with you within KEAMS. So if there's any kind of issue with one of your submissions that they need a correction or they're missing something, this is how they're probably going to contact you. If there are any next steps, you might get reminders for certain things. So always be sure to check these. We will come back to start a new form just because that's going to be one of the main sections that we're going through. We're going to spend the most time there because that's where you start on the permit renewal. So the next section we want to talk about is details. And this is one that only shows up if you have a site selected because it's only showing you information for one site at a time. So this is going to be more information on that site specifically. I'm not going to get too in detail on that, but you've got this detail section, kind of the site plan for reference, contacts, and relations. So going back to all and then down to submissions. So this is where you're going to see things that have been submitted. So by default, it's going to show all active. You can also look at received. One thing to note here, so you'll notice that this says view or revise. So once you've submitted a form to KDHE, you can go in and revise that submission, but keep in mind that from the time you start revising to the time that you submit again, review on that document stops. So you want to make sure that you go ahead and submit once you've started that, once you finish your revision. And that's why you see here, continue draft, because that one a revision has been started, but it hasn't been submitted. So this is where you see your active drafts. And then we have not started, not approved, in process, and completed. So next is the contacts list. So this is just going to be contacts associated with your account. Generally, that's going to be maybe associated with your different facilities. And then permits and registration. So this is where you're going to see your permits once they've been processed or while they're in process. This is where you're going to see your permits. So here you'll see this is in effect. So this is the current permit in effect for that tank because this is another UST permit. This one says issued but not, or issued not in effect. So that could be like if you're just submitted that one in this cycle, then your old permit is still in effect. This one has been issued, but it doesn't go into effect until the old one expires and the new one takes over. And then next is evaluations and inspections. So this is mostly on the KDHE side. This is where they're going to keep your inspection records and things like that. You're not going to be able to access inspection records generally from here. Again, it's mostly on the KDHE side. But if you get something like a notice of violation, this is where that would show up. Okay, next up is financials. So this is where you'll see the balance on forms that have associated fees. So we can see this one was paid. So that's green and it's showing a 0. We have a lot of test forms in here, so it looks like there's a lot of fees due. So if you didn't pay the fee associated with a permit when you submitted that permit renewal, then this is where you would go to pay that. So you select one, click open, and then so this is where you'll see charges. If there's a refund request on something, this is also where you would go to see that. And then you go to this section and you can either click pay online or pay by mail. We'll go ahead and get to, and that's the site that you'll use to pay online. So that's ICANN. And one thing to note, ICANN will give you the receipt for your payment. That's going to be through their system, not through Keem. So be sure to print that off, or at least save a copy of that in some way. And then you can also pay by mail. So this is where you go to get those instructions to pay by mail. So for this, you're going to have to print off a payment voucher to put in with your payment, just so they can process that correctly and credit it to your account. This is also where you find where to send your payment. And then next is documents. So again, this is where you can see forms that have been submitted and attachments that go with them. You're only going to see finalized documents here generally. And a lot of times KDHE will change that submission ID, change the title to be the title of the form rather than the submission ID. But as you can see, that's not always the case. All right, and then a couple more things that just show up if you have a specific site selected. There's also authorized users. So this is where you're going to find the administrator, editors, viewers for your account. Right, and then getting to the actual renewal process. So we're going to start at start a new form. Actually, we're going to select the KDHE site because that's the one that has a UST associated with it. We're going to go to start a new form, and then you want to select, I want to renew, modify, or terminate an existing permit, license, or registration. So you can use Control F, you can use this filter here. There aren't a lot here, so I'm just going to scroll down. One thing to note here. So you'll see that there are 2 different versions of the underground storage tank permit renewal form. You see how this one is version 5.0 and this one is version 5.4. So if you have multiple versions, you want to look for whichever one has the highest version number and go with that. And then go ahead and click begin. And that will take us to this begin form entry. I just had these up just because it can take a little bit to load, so something to keep in mind. And then go ahead and click that, and it will take you to this page, and you can go ahead and start. A few navigation notes before we get started. So exit form to home is going to be the easiest way to get back to your main Keems page from here. If you mouse over this, sometimes it takes a minute. Kind of flashed up on there. There we go. So that'll give you a little bit more information on the form, including some instructions. Another important thing to note is this Save Progress button. It does automatically save whenever you switch between sections, but it's always a good thing to regularly save manually just to make sure that you keep your progress. Another thing to note is the Clear Section button. You can use this, but it's strongly recommended that you avoid that button. You can end up clearing more than you meant to. And then, of course, you still have About and Contact up here if you need to get back to this page. And again, if you're doing that, probably want to go to the remediation webpage to get a little bit more specific information and assistance. Sorry about that, went back to the wrong one. All right. Okay, so this first section, facility information, you can see a lot of this is already populated from your permit information. So you'll want to still check this over and make sure it looks correct. But if there's an issue with it, you will have to contact KDHE to get that corrected. You can't edit it directly in Keams. And then you will need to put in the facility contact. So this is the part that it actually has you enter in every time. So if the facility contact you want here is someone who already has an account in Keams associated with this facility, then you can autofill from that contact dropdown, or you can go ahead and manually enter that. So we'll go ahead and do that here. And note the red asterisks. As with a lot of forms, that means this is a required field and it's not going to let you submit if you don't have those fields filled in. All right, and going to the next section. So this is going to be tank owner information. Same deal with a lot of this, or most of this is already there. You have the clear section button, but don't recommend using that. Check this over, make sure it seems correct, and if not, you will need to contact KDHE if anything needs to be edited. And then again, we have that autofill option, or you can enter manually. It's already kind of auto-filled this, so we'll go ahead and go with that. You do also have this validate address button down here if you want to check and make sure that the address you've entered is valid, but it's not required. And then again, we have the 24-hour emergency contact information. Same deal, where you can either enter manually or you can autofill. And again, this is a required section. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can add a phone number if you'd like an additional phone number there. And then we go down to tank information. And this is all already autofilled. Just take a quick look. But there's nothing you actually need to enter here or can enter on your own. But this gives you information on your tank that's already on there, or reminds you of it at least. And then you'll see over here that little 2. That means that there's 2 tanks on this renewal. The first one is already showing. And if you want to look at the second one, you can just scroll down to here and then click that to expand that information and see the information for the second tank. And then we will go to line information. Same deal here. It's all already entered in. Just take a quick look and make sure it looks okay. And again, to see the second one, scroll down, click that to expand. All right, next we're getting into some of the permitting items. So we have monthly monitoring. A couple notes on this. So this does cover the previous calendar year. So if you're submitting now in April of 2022, then you're looking for your monitoring records from January to December of 2021. You will find the forms that you need are available for download in this portal. This is information that you should be gathering over the course of the year, so you should have that information. But if you need to put it in the correct format, you can get those forms here, or if you want to have a copy handy for the next cycle. And then also on this section, note that this does not apply to temporarily out of service tanks or what am I thinking of? Sorry, I was thinking of a different section. This does not apply to temporarily out of service tanks. So we've got a little bit of basic information on what each of the monthly monitoring methods is that you could have. And then you have some information on your tank specifically and your line specifically as far as what monitoring methods that you're using. So in this section, you only need to attach the forms associated with the monitoring methods you have listed here. And again, you've got the forms here if you need to download those. And another thing this is where you upload. And another thing to note, so one, you will need both your annual summary and your December summary. So you want to make sure and get both of those. And if you have an ATG, there is also a section down here on how to pull your compliance reports from some common models of ATG. Right, and then next is the inventory control section. So again, previous calendar year, and this does not apply for temporarily out of service, used oil, or standby tanks. And again, you have both the forms that you need and instructions on how to do inventory control if you need a refresher on some of that. So this is where you upload both your annual summary, and again, you also need your December 30-day inventory record. All right, and then next is the walkthrough inspection checklist. Again, you can get the Excel file here. You can download that here to fill out. Again, this is something that you should be doing over the course of the year, so you should already have that documented. And then this is where you upload. And then we go to temporarily out of service if applicable. So this is the form that you need to fill out if you have a temporarily out of service tank. And you can download that here, fill it out, and submit here. Otherwise, go ahead and skip this section. Next, we have Cathodic Protection. Again, you have information on whether or not this applies to your tank, in which case you need to go ahead and submit. If you don't have a cathodic protection system for your tank, then you can go ahead and skip this section. Again, you have your annual summary form, and then this is where you submit. And then we go to miscellaneous. So this is where you would submit any other documents like testing, financial responsibility, or AB operator certifications. And I'm going to throw in a reminder here too about some new testing requirements under the 2020 update to the Kansas UST regulations, that you are now required to have those regular inspections of your spill buckets, your overfill prevention, and any release monitoring equipment. So if you have an ATG, that includes the probes, that includes the console, you have to have each part of that tested. And that the first tests for that were due October of 2021. So you want to make sure and get those in on your permit for this year. All right, moving down, we have the fees section. So this gets into detail about how those fees are calculated. Main thing to take away here is pay your fee by April 30th. Try and avoid those late fees. And then tells you how many being renewed, what your total fee is due. And then that takes us to review. So again, this is where you can review all of this. And one thing to note, you remember those red asterisks from earlier on, those first few sections of the permit renewal form. So if you skipped one of those sections that had a red asterisk, it's going to flag that and it's not going to let you submit unless you go back and fill in those fields. That is not the case for your permitting items like your monthly monitoring, your inventory control, walkthrough inspection checklist, cathodic protection, and all your miscellaneous. It does not have coded in there to know what you need and tell you if you're missing something. So you can submit while you're missing something, and you need to go ahead and check and make sure you've got all of that. But this is where you can go through and check all that. There's a lot there. And then scroll down to certify and submit. So You can also save and exit and come back later, or this is where you go ahead and submit. And again, by clicking submit form, you are saying, I certify that all information provided is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. There is no are you sure once you hit submit form. This is it. So we'll go ahead and hit that button. And then this is where you can either pay online. And again, that'll take you to that ICANN system. Make sure and print your receipt from there. Or again, it'll take you to instructions to pay by mail. You can also close this out and come back and pay later in that financials tab. So that is our presentation for today. Any questions?
Allison, we have a few questions here. Some we may have covered, but you might just go over it again. The first one is, where can you print out a receipt when you have paid online?
Okay, so again, on that one, the receipt is going to be from the ICANN system. So I can't really get in and show you that, but that is something that you'll print when you pay that in ICANN. You can also see in the financials tab, again, if it's been credited to your account, but the receipt for payment is through ICANN.
Great. Is there an option to upload a digital copy of the monthly inventory record?
So if you mean just a copy of your Excel file or something like that, yes, you'll go ahead and upload that. They are working on something where you can fill out the inventory record in the system, like in Keem. So it's, or I think it was a fillable PDF, but something that you can do more of it on your computer without printing it off. That's still a work in progress, so we don't have that yet.
Great. Okay. The next one is on the miscellaneous items section. It states the forms can be submitted. Do we need to submit AB certificates, etc.?
Yes, those need to be submitted through that miscellaneous items section. And again, I'm going to put a quick reminder here about those new testing requirements. So that's going to be your spill buckets, your overfill prevention, and your release monitoring. And that can be multiple components that need to be tested. So make sure you know what your requirement is there.
Okay. If the forms have already been submitted by mail, can we pay online?
So to pay online, you do have to submit the form online. So if you've already submitted by mail, you can go ahead and submit your payment by mail. Or if you really want to pay online, you will have to resubmit the form online and then pay.
Another payment question. We paid by mail. When does it update online?
So that depends. Basically, when KDHE receives it, they go ahead and process and post it to the account. From what I've heard, that's been getting done pretty quickly once they receive the payment. So it'll vary, but it sounds like it's been basically a little bit after it comes in the mail.
Great. The only new paperwork to be submitted this year is the spill basin and overfill protection inspection, correct?
So there is that and the release detection monitoring equipment. So that could be, that's most likely to be your ATG if you have an ATG. So any equipment associated with that would also need to be tested.
Okay, and when, if they are missing paperwork, will KDHE send them a message through Keems?
So if there's an issue in processing your permit, if there's anything they're missing from you, then yes, Keems is generally how they're going to contact you if there's something else they need from you or there's an issue or something like that.
Okay, last one. It says, do I still need to submit testing documentation for release monitoring if all of our sites use SIR?
So it kind of depends, because SIR, so that's not directly using a release detection method, if that makes sense. Like it's not a direct monitoring method in the way some of the others are. So you're not using interstitial monitoring, you're not using an ATG, that's equipment that's constantly monitoring. but you might be using an ATG for your inventory control. And if that's the case, then the ATG still needs to be tested because SIR relies on your ATG if that's what you're on your, or SIR relies on your inventory control, sorry. So the short answer is if you're using SIR and you are using automated equipment, basically an ATG, to help with inventory control, then that still needs to be tested.
Okay, that's all the questions that were submitted.
All right, well, thanks everybody for attending, and we will get this posted.